topic is about it's about unforgiveness.
Wow.
And how to fix that with gratitude. So I kind of have a lot to share, so I'm going to try and go through this, and if I'm going too fast, just stop me. I'm going to try not to look at the clock and worry myself there, but basically to jump right into it, and what is unforgiveness? I know it can look different for every person, but the definition that jumped out at me when I was researching about it was that unforgiveness is just justified hatred.
Wow.
So it's basically allowing ourselves to get away with the sin of hatred because we feel like we've justified it because someone else did something to us to hurt us.
Wow.
So basically, I have the signs of unforgiveness or the symptoms,
Okay.
you know, of like if it was WebMD, you could type it in. So we could go through this today and see if any of us have it because I think we all have a little bit of unforgiveness.
All right.
So I have the symptoms here, and they are, you have random bursts of anger, you act petty or impulsively, you have a hard time taking personal responsibility,
Slow down.
you appear righteous or entitled, you have bitterness in your heart, you try to administer justice, you keep a list of offenses, you have self-hatred in your heart. Now, I know I have every single one of those, and I have been through every single one of those. But what I'm going to be talking about today is how to turn that script around.
Amen.
And to take it to the Bible, so we have actual biblical example here. There's a bit of a pattern that God shows in the early, the beginning of the Bible, right in Genesis. This pattern of those who are favored and those who are not favored. And if you'll look at the ones who are not favored, they show that those symptoms of unforgiveness in their stories.
Wow.
So if you start right up in the beginning, Genesis 4 talks about Cain and Abel. If you don't know the story of Cain and Abel, Abel was the younger brother. He brought a better offering. He had the favor from God. Cain didn't, and so he killed him because he wasn't favored. And then you can jump right up to Genesis 25, and this is just, you can look and read the whole thing on your own time. Genesis is just a huge story. It's in there, like, you want to just go through all of Genesis. That's a great place to just refresh and look through. But at Genesis 25, Abraham's son Isaac had Jacob, who was the younger one, and Esau was the older one, even though they were twins. But Jacob ended up getting the favor, even though he was younger. Esau had the natural favor because he was born the oldest, but Jacob gets a bigger blessing. And so what happens when he gets the favor is that Esau again plots to kill him, but Jacob gets away. So then there's a little bit of foreshadowing that happens in Jacob's story, because Jacob becomes the father of Joseph. But before he even sees Joseph's story, he has a revelation and a dream come to him. And that's in Genesis 28:12. And it says that when the angels came down to speak to Jacob, God spoke and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. And that part really sticks with me because Jacob had favor that didn't just affect his life, but it affected the lives of everyone, not just his children, but the entire nation. And we'll see how that comes into play in Joseph's story, but essentially what happens is that Joseph ends up being born a son of Jacob from his wife Rachel. And in Genesis 30:22, it said that God remembered Rachel and gave her a son, which is crazy to me because in the word remember there, it's the Hebrew word is zakar. That means mention. It's an action word. And so God took action when he thought of Rachel, and he gave the son.
Awesome.
And I think later on, it says in Genesis 40:14 in Joseph's story, when he's, in the jail and he ends up, prophesying and giving the interpretation of the dream, he tells them, remember me to Pharaoh. Right. Not as just in that moment, not just think of me and what I did, but do something about it when you get out.
Yeah. Come on.
But anyways, we'll get into a little bit of that later. But back to Rachel. She names him Joseph, which means he will add. And Rachel in this story, she couldn't have kids. She wanted to have kids, but she couldn't. And in that moment, she finally gets that breakthrough. And so she names him a name that's a blessing for her. She said, he will add. Now I'm going to be able to have kids. I'm going to have more after this one. And that's what she names him, which is awesome. And she does end up having another kid. But his name changes throughout the story. It doesn't just mean he will add for her situation. It means he's going to add for every situation.
All right.
And that's back to that favor that he had on him. That wasn't just from him. It was from generations and generations, that favor that was still on him.
Come on.
And his name, the funny part about his name kind of changing meaning is that he has a very long history of that happening. Like Jacob, when he wrestled with God, got his name changed to Israel. And even Benjamin, when Rachel was born, when Rachel had her second son, Benjamin, she named him, I think it's Ben-Ani, which is not a very good name. And so I think it meant son of my sorrow. So they end up changing it to Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. So they keep getting their names changed and keep getting their stories rewritten, their scripts changed. So anyways, back to Joseph though. So he had the favor. And I always think this story is funny because whenever I read Joseph, I always look at it from the perspective of the other brothers because I never really saw myself as the Joseph, as the favored one. I was always looking at it like, man, I'm the Reuben in this story. I'm the other brothers. Like, I'm responding how they would respond. But essentially, when you think about it, you look like the Joseph of the family to someone else in your life.
Yes.
You have that favor from God on you. You're walking in it all the time.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, why am I getting attacked? Why am I getting this and that? You're shining. You have that favor on you all the time. And that comes with some heartache. That comes with some hurt that happens because you have his blessing. You have a certain elevation, a certain light on you that Joseph had. So I just have to remember that, like, oh, I look like the Joseph to someone else,
right.
You know, and so do all of you.
Amen.
But anyways, so in his story, it says right at the beginning, I think this is Genesis 37, it said that Jacob loved Joseph the most, like, period. Like, no question, he loved Joseph the most. So it says right there that he had the favor, the other brothers just didn't have the same measure of favor. Not that they didn't have any, they just didn't have the same measure. When I think about that story, he ends up telling a dream to his brothers about how he's going to end up ruling over them, is essentially what that dream means. And I always thought, like, why would you tell them that? Like, that is such a crazy thing to tell them. If I knew my brothers hated me, I wouldn't tell them this dream about, you know, how awesome I'm going to be. Right. But I started to, like, look into this more, and I think he was trying to get their respect. He was trying to get their respect, and he was looking to them for favor. Right. He already had it on him.
Right.
Come on.
So that's like, you don't have to look at the people around you. If you already have the blessing, it's on you.
Amen.
Bring it.
That's right.
So
Amen.
it's kind of interesting when it starts the story. He's 17 years old, like he's young, and already his dad was making him be the administrator of the family. He was saying, "Go out to the fields and check on your brothers. Go out and do this and that." And if you look at his story, that's a pattern of what happens to him throughout it. He ends up becoming the overseer of every single place he's put into.
Come on.
In the jail that he gets thrown into, in Potiphar's house when he ends up running his house, and in Pharaoh's house when he ends up running that place as well.
Right.
We were laughing earlier talking about, like, how do you end up being the administrator of the jail? Like, what do? You just look around and you're like, yep, there's still 3 of us in here. Like, I counted today. Like, what are you going to say to me? I don't know. They said he was head of the jail, but you know, he was still in there. But anyway, I think that one of my favorite quotes that I found about forgiveness that really applies to Joseph's story is this one from John K. Jenkins. And he says, "Do not allow what people do to you to impact your relationship with God. Don't allow anything else, any other hurt, any other issue that they cause with you to affect your direct relationship with God." And that's exactly what happens with Joseph's story. He doesn't let how his brothers treat him determine how he uses his gifts, how he uses his favor, how he uses his blessing. And you can see this in Genesis 40, I believe it's Genesis 48. he, in this moment, and it's kind of funny because you could say like, well, when did he forgive him? Did he forgive him whenever he blesses his brothers later on with grain and with favor and with a place to live? Did he forgive them like at the end of his life? Did he forgive them in the moment? Like, they don't exactly say. But for me, the picture of forgiveness that I see, and the reason why I know in my heart that he forgave him, is the verse where he uses his gifts to interpret the dream in the jail.
Wow.
And his gifting has to do with dreams, has to do with interpreting dreams. But if you remember, that's exactly what got him there in the first place from that story. And you can reread this story and go back into it. I'm not going to go into the whole story right now, but in Joseph's story, when he tells his brothers a dream, that's when they plot to kill him. When he shares his gifts of having dreams and what they mean, that's when they beat him down, you know? But that was his gifting. And in that moment, he could take that and turn it into bitterness and say, I'm not going to use that gift anymore.
Come on.
You know, yeah, it was from God, but they hurt me when I used it. You know, yeah, God gave me this gift, but look where I ended up. And he used his gift when he was in the jail that he got thrown into from what had happened to him. He didn't have to do that. He didn't know in that moment that it was going to get him out. It was going to be the key to his release. But he decided to use his gift regardless because he didn't allow what anyone else did to him to affect his relationship with God.
Amen.
And that is when I know, like, wow, right there, he has forgiveness because he's not showing the symptoms of unforgiveness.
Wow.
In that moment. He's
Hello.
showing that he doesn't have bitterness. He's not thinking back on that moment. He's acting in his gifts. Anyway, so throughout the whole story, he ends up telling Pharaoh his dream and deciphering it. That's how he gets to be Lord of Pharaoh's house. But he tells him, this is not me who's telling you this dream. This is God. Because again, this is God's gift to me. This is God imparted through me. And I'm not changing that relationship based on what happens. He could have told Pharaoh, yeah, I'm the best in the land. This is my, this is all for me. I did it. I interpreted this for you. He said, no, don't get this wrong. This is not from me. This is from God. And then, so essentially that's the gist of the story of Joseph. But something that I think is interesting when I'm learning about these people with favor and people without favor is that the people with favor, when they had that favor came with a perception of a bigger picture as well. It's not just the blessings that we have, it's why we have them.
Oh, come on.
How are we supposed to use them to help
Preach it.
someone else? It's not just that Joseph was great at telling dreams and interpreting them, it's so that he could save the land.
Preach
So he could
it.
save the entire area
Come on.
from famine. That's why he had it. It's the perception of a bigger picture. It's what it looks like. That he went through all of that just to get to the end of saving everyone else. That's a bigger picture. That's something that the people who have unforgiveness, they don't have that favor, they're not seeing that.
Oh, come on.
They can only judge what they see. They didn't have the bigger picture. They didn't believe that that person, had the ability to have that favor, had the ability to do all those things. Like, I don't think that Joseph's brothers were like, wow, yeah, he's gonna be right hand to Pharaoh one day. He's really, I see that for him. I don't think they had that perception.
No.
I don't think that even in Jacob and Esau's story, they say that Esau was this big man, he was hairy, he was like out in the fields, he did all this stuff, and they describe Jacob as like, he was inside of the tents, like he has like one sentence in the description, and like Esau has this whole bigger picture. I don't think that Esau had the perception that Jacob was going to have all of the nations, he was going to have all of the children, he was going to have all of this blessing. He didn't have that perception. But you cannot allow other people's perception of you to define how you use your gifts. To define your relationship with God. That is like such a crucial moment for me because it shows how the other people in the story, they get stuck in that, individual moment of like, well, you can't do that, It's not about what I can do, it's about what God can do through me. Right? So none of that even matters, Okay, let me see where I am with my notes. I don't want to get lost here. So essentially, when I was learning about these stories, if you look at them, a lot of the ones that I'm talking about, the younger brother is the one with the favor. And this is not like a dig or a hate on the older sibling here, but it's God showing us something. He's showing us about how the underdog is meant to win in these stories so that we can see that it was most certainly God, to reveal God's glory through the situation, right? So he's showing us, like, I mean, even look at the other stories, like David, he was the youngest, like Joseph, he was the youngest. I mean, he was second youngest, but he was not the head of the household. So he's showing us that there's a reason why they overcome. It's because they don't look like they could. They don't have the authority to naturally overcome just on their own strength.
That's right.
It was by God's strength. And there's a reason why that pattern happens in the beginning, is to show us Israel itself is an underdog.
Come on.
Against Egypt. Egypt had the perception that Israel couldn't do anything. They're like, let's enslave them. What are they going to do? There might be too many of them. They might multiply and start a war, so let's just enslave them, knock them down a peg. And Israel flips the script. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole purpose. It's the same, thread happening.
Come on.
Of the favor being put on the person that is the most unlikely.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyways, I went through a little bit of that. Yeah, so back to, other people's perception of your potential. It does not matter to God. He cares more about the action that you take with the gifts that he gives you than what anybody else thinks about you. It doesn't matter if you look silly or if you share something with someone and they get mad. Guess what? Joseph's brothers got mad when he told them their dream.
Come on.
They threw him in a ditch.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's stopping us from using our gifts?
That's a bad
Wow.
reaction.
What's stopping us from doing the things that God's called us to do? Someone might laugh at us, might lose some money. Like Joseph could have died. They were going to kill him.
Yes, they were.
And he used his gifts anyways,
Amen.
So there's something special about that favor as well. And the favor not only brings that perception, that bigger picture, but it also brings a hope. Because the hope of what God calls you to be carries you through everything you're going through. Because if you can see that bigger picture, you have a hope that there's something more around the corner. And Joseph realized that the only way to the end goal, to having all that land and all that money and everything, was to go through what he went through. There was no other way he could have gotten connection with Pharaoh except to go to Potiphar's house and then go to jail and then, get all that level of elevation. Like, he couldn't have shortcut that.
Nope.
He created his story, and it had to be the way that it happened for him to get to the end goal.
Amen.
And that takes vision. That takes being able to see what God's called us to do and what God's placed in our heart. You may not be able to see your elevation in the end. You may not be able to see yourself, as like Pharaoh's right hand, as like that level of status. You may not be able to see that. But if you can at least see that God has called you to something bigger than yourself, then that, everything else doesn't matter. Everything else, all the hurt that other people, do to us, anything else that happens to us, if we can see that it's not about us, it's about something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
If Joseph had stayed in his bitterness and he hadn't decided to use his dreams, that whole place would have been wrecked with famine.
Yeah.
No, come on.
They would have been wrecked.
Yeah.
That's thousands of lives just gone. But he chose to use his gifts anyways. So the kind of second part here that I wanted to talk about was how to fix that unforgiveness and that bitterness that we have. Because we're not always at that Joseph moment in the story. Sometimes we're at, the other brothers. We're in that moment, and that's okay. But he doesn't want us to stay there. He wants us to be able to get to that place of favor and that place of forgiveness.
Amen.
So the second part is how to fix unforgiveness and bitterness with gratitude. And if we talk about forgiveness, the definition for forgiveness means that we cease to feel resentment, we clear the slate, we shred their list of wrongs.
Wow.
So if we take all the symptoms of unforgiveness and we, Missy Elliott, flip it and reverse it, we can have the answer to the forgiveness. So just go through that, like
Walk it back.
take personal responsibility. That's a sign of forgiveness. You know? Get rid of that bitterness in your heart. Start to be grateful.
Amen.
Stop administering justice. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. That's his job.
Right.
So, you know, that's a sign of forgiveness right there. If we stop trying to dish out that justice on our own, shred our list of offenses.
Amen.
I know that personally, I have books that I'm putting through the shredder, you know, like, I'm having to get rid of them. It's like a catalog and stuff. But get rid of the list. Like, it doesn't mean that you let someone hurt you in the same way again, but it means that you change your heart as to how you feel about them.
Amen.
You know? So, change the self-hatred in your heart. Self-hatred is such a big sign of unforgiveness. And if you love yourself, then you can love your brother.
Amen.
And they always say, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, how are you going to treat your neighbor? How you've already started negatively. You treat yourself negatively. You know, if Joseph had a poor, self-image, treating himself bad, you'd be like, I can't do it. You know, I'm not going to be able to make it.
Yeah.
They hurt me. Treat them bad. You know, maybe they wouldn't have had all that grain. They wouldn't have had all that blessing.
Come on.
So, went through that, did that. You're checking the list. So how do we get to that forgiveness, though? It's a big step. It's not just overnight. You couldn't, I wouldn't say like, you can walk out today with forgiveness for just 3 easy payments of $99.99, like it's not that easy. But we can start to get to that place of forgiveness through becoming appreciative for the things that we do have. For creating positive habits, and starting to think positively. And my dad said this, but instead of a vicious cycle, create a victory cycle.
Amen.
And that's when you start walking in that positive action. You start walking in that positive thinking, so much so that it's a habit, it's a cycle. You don't have to think about it, it's just happening. You're just on that path. But I talked about the word remember earlier, and when God remembered, it meant take action. But it's the same reason why we take communion. Do this in remembrance of me.
Come on.
It's not just that we do the thing when we think about God. What's nice is to take that same action of forgiveness that He gave to us and give it to ourselves and give it to other people. It's an action. It's not a thought. It's not something we just, that's nice. We have to do something with it.
That's it.
And if He gave us all that forgiveness, why can't we give even just a fraction of that out to someone else?
Amen.
So that's part of it too, taking communion. Creating those positive habits. I think about the amount of gratitude that Joseph had in his heart. And him staying inside of his purpose despite everything changed his perception. Because he stayed on his path, regardless of how much it sucked,
Right.
And he started thinking, this situation happened for me and not to me.
Come on.
Too often we're thinking, oh, this happened to me. This hurt me. It didn't happen to you. It happened for you so that your script could change, so that your story could be more than it was without that situation. He had, Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose, right? So it's talking about that purpose, right? It's talking about staying in that lane of His purpose, regardless of where that takes you. It could take you to a ditch like Joseph's did,
Wow.
but it led him to so much more.
Yes.
Yeah.
So another thing to help us get on that path of forgiveness is looking for the good. And in Joseph's story, even if the good was just that someone else's life was better, in Genesis 45:7 or 9, he says, But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Not, thank God you threw me in that ditch. Look what I did on my own. I got up and I got all this money and I got all this elevation and this and that. He's like, no, I'm so grateful I was able to save your life.
Come on.
Imagine having that much gratitude that you're able to be grateful that you helped the person who hurt you in the first place.
Oh,
Oh,
That you're able to save the person who put you in that
preach
ditch.
it.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, that is gratitude. That is gratitude. So he says, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all of Egypt.
Amen.
He said, it's not you guys. You know,
Yeah.
God didn't, do this to me. He did it for me.
Come
Yes.
on.
It's not a negative. He turned it around.
Amen.
He started thinking positively over the situation.
Yes.
So, if we start to have that gratitude, we can change our negative situation. Not the situation itself, but our perception of it.
Mm.
And gratitude, and my example of gratitude is that it's bitterness eraser.
I
It's
love it.
bitterness eraser.
I love it.
Because when you start
Come
thinking
on.
about gratitude and how grateful you are, that bitterness doesn't have room in your heart because your heart's full. It's full of that thankfulness. So, another thing is, when we talk about that, look for what he's teaching us through the situation. When we start to have gratitude, and we can start to accept the things that we're bitter about and turn them into actual positive things.
Amen.
I'm going to read from Genesis 50:15 through 20, and that's at the end. So in Joseph's story, his brothers don't ask for forgiveness until after their father dies.
Mm.
This whole time,
Mm.
they were just kind of coasting, thinking like, oh, he's treating us good because he likes our father, so he's being nice with us. But when their father died, it said they were terrified.
Right.
They were like, oh, now he's going to kill us.
Wow.
Oh, now we should ask for forgiveness.
Wow.
In that moment, they go up to him and they're like, we're sorry, we're your slaves, please forgive us, please don't hurt us, and all this. And Joseph's like, I forgave y'all years ago, he's not thinking about it like they are, but they are like in fear.
Mm.
So he says, one of my favorite parts of the whole story, he goes, okay, so when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers and the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. And they came to him, and Joseph wept in that moment. And his brothers threw themselves down before him, and they said, we are your slaves. And Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in place of God? Do I administer my own justice? That's a symptom of unforgiveness.
Come on.
Wow.
He said, no. He said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good,
Yeah.
to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. He said, so then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children.
Come
And he reassured them and spoke highly to them. So they were worried that he hadn't forgiven them yet, and he was like, that's over. Like, he had shred that list of offenses.
Come on.
He had gotten rid of all of that
Right.
negative thinking about them.
Mm.
And there's different ways that you can get to that level of gratitude as well. You can start, you can count them throughout the day. You can write them down. You can speak them into existence. You can listen to positive media. You can share with a friend. Share the positive things going on with a friend. I write mine down. I have like a gratitude journal that I started. And
Come on.
I started it whenever I was having a really bad day. And I would get to the end of the day and I'm gonna force myself to write one positive thing, even if it's just I woke up this morning, I didn't die, or whatever, and I was just force myself, and I was just start to force myself to fill out the page and just come up with things that I was grateful for. And I started doing that, and it really helps. I started doing that at the end of every day, just at the end of the night, just writing down the things I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
But there's something special about speaking positively. That's different than just writing things out. When we speak positively, we change our whole attitude. it's not a coincidence that in the very beginning of the story of Joseph, it says that when talking about when his brothers hated him, that Joseph's brothers could speak no good word over him.
Wow.
They didn't have a single positive thing to say. And something that, when I think about that story, I'm like, why won't he tell them his dream? Not only did he act in his gift, but he spoke his dream into existence by telling them. And he didn't just tell them. He told them, he told his dad, he was just telling everybody about it. He was like the man of positive thinking. He was speaking it into existence by telling literally everyone. But he called it to be. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, right? Proverbs 18:21. And we usually talk about that when someone's saying something negative, and when someone's swearing or saying something bad, or like, death and life are in the power of the tongue. But it's death and life are in the power of the tongue. Why aren't we utilizing the second part? That's so important. That's so crucial. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Start speaking life over yourself.
Amen.
People always say, you don't have anything good to say about someone. Like, don't say anything at all, right? Like, I think that's terrible, because if you're not saying anything good, you're thinking something bad.
Okay.
Instead of don't say anything negative about someone, don't say anything at all. Speak something positive regardless. Period.
All right.
If you feel some negative type of way about somebody, force yourself. I dare you to say something positive about them instead of negative.
I like her dress.
Speak something positive. Speak something positive. If you don't have anything good to say, don't just sit there and hold it and be like, well, I'm not saying it, so I'm still holy. Like, no, speak something better. You not only are going to change their life, you're going to change your own life by speaking that. When we talk about the power of words, and Maureen, you talk about this too when you talk, is not just how it affects, it's not just how it affects other people and ourselves. Like, it does something, it changes something in our brain. Like, the science behind it is crazy. When you speak negatively, your brain can't decipher that you're not talking about yourself. Your brain can't tell the difference. It just takes that in as negatively. In the same way, your brain can't tell who you're talking about when you're talking positively. It's like, wow, that's nice. You said all this positive stuff about someone else. I'm going to take that for myself. You're taking that for yourself when you tell someone a positive thing. So, a little personal testimony. I was in the car the other day, and I was coming home from work, and I had a rough day at work. It was a long day or whatever, and I'm already in a bad mood. And I get a text from one of the siblings who shall be unnamed, and they were supposed to make dinner and be in charge of it because the parents were gone. And they were like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make dinner. This and that. Dog puked in the living room. This and that. All this stuff that I didn't want to come home to. And I'm just in the car like, oh my God, they never do this. Like, I'm already starting that negative cycle. I was already starting that, right? And I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm changing my perception, right? So I turned off the radio, and I felt super weird doing this at first because I'm like driving down and passing people, and I'm talking out loud in the car, and like people are seeing me, and there's like no music. But I started speaking positive things. And at first, I didn't even believe them. I was saying things like, I am so grateful that they always help me out at home. I was like saying it like that, but I kept doing it until I did start to believe it. Until I was just calling everybody out. I was like, I'm so grateful for the potential inside of Elise, and I'm so grateful for the potential inside of, Dan and everybody. I was just going down the list to the point where I was happy to get home. I was so excited to go home because I was like, I'm so grateful for these people with all this potential. I'm so grateful to see them. I'm so grateful for what they do for me. I'm so grateful for the times that they have helped me, even if this isn't one of them. And then when I got home, the unnamed child was cooking dinner. She was doing the stuff she said she wasn't even going to do. And, everything worked out, and everyone was in a good, positive way. And I changed the perception of the situation. I didn't change the situation. She had already started cooking. God didn't drop her a message whenever I was, praying in the car and was like, go do the thing. She had already done the thing. I didn't change the situation, but I changed my attitude toward it. And that's the biggest thing. We can't control everything that happens to us. We can't control the situations that happen to us, but we can control our attitude by changing our perception.
Come on.
By speaking gratitude.
Amen.
Ephesians 4:29 says, Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Not just us, but those who listen. I think about people who have like arguments and fights, and I'm like, man, they think they're just fighting between them, but they're affecting the ears of everyone around them, you know? And imagine if we talked positively as much as we spoke negatively, and how that would change the ears of everyone around us.
Yeah.
I'm almost done, I promise. I'm like at the bottom of the page.
Good.
It's important to remember God's goodness for us. And then when we remember that goodness, we act on it and we give goodness to someone else, right? Because he's been so good to us, right? I can tell you stories after stories. And I need to know that when I remember God's goodness, that I have to do something about it. I have to go and be good to someone else because he's good to me. And then I have 1 John 4:20. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. There's a quote from Les Mis, which is a musical, but Victor Hugo wrote it, and he said, "To love another person is to see the face of God."
Wow.
In Genesis 33:10, one of my favorite parts of the full story is Jacob and Esau's reconciliation, because after everything that happened with Jacob and Esau and all that went down, Jacob thought the same way that Joseph's brothers thought. He was like, when I see him again, he's gonna kill me. He was hiding people away, he was splitting up his fields and flocks and stuff like that. And so when he pulls up behind Esau, and Esau is like, embraces him, they're crying, and he's so excited to see him. And he's like, Esau's trying to give him stuff, and Jacob's trying to give him stuff, and he's like, no, please. And Jacob says, if I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Now that you have received me favorably. And my little translation of that is, it's almost like seeing God's face, seeing your face, glad to see my face. Like, isn't that just so precious, like that moment of like, even just the visual of what happens, not just what we say, but how our countenance toward other people. Like, isn't it so special to see someone, even with your mask on, you can see when someone's smiling in their eyes when they light up.
Yeah.
When you walk in a room, like, isn't that so powerful? Like, it's the little things like that. It's just like, I just kind of want to challenge us today and this whole week. Like, if there's someone that you have negative feelings about, do something nice for them.
Wow.
Or say something nice about them. To their face, even. Maybe a message, whatever it is. Even if it's just like, I'm grateful for the potential inside of you.
Yeah.
Because I am grateful. Even if it's somebody negative that I don't like, I'm grateful for what God could possibly do through them. Because even the worst case scenario, that person beats me up, hurts me, whatever, even in the worst case scenario, God's going to do something through that. He's going to bring something out of that, something positive. And so that's what I got today. I'm grateful for the potential inside of all of you, because I know that when I say that, I'm saying it back at myself as well.
Amen.
So that's what I got.
Amen.
Woo, hallelujah. Wow.
All righty. Why don't you guys stand up? Let's do a little guided meditation here. We'll keep it quick. So, just close your eyes. Get in your little happy spot. You can hug yourself if you want.